This programming is brought to you clutter-free by Bank of America.
Bank of America provides resources to move your business forward.
It's an honor now to present our keynote speaker for the conference, Karla Jackson. Karla is Deputy Head of Acquisition, all procurement for NASA. And she is also one of only 3 senior executives in the Defense Department who has the ability to sign policies and program changes or new policies and programs within for the federal government, actually. So, Karla, please come up here and talk to us about NASA and your role and your responsibilities. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a new day in space exploration. As we sail on this new cosmic sea, there's so much to learn. There's so much to be excited about. American companies will soon land payloads on the moon for the first time. These missions are really challenging and risky. They're going to help us conduct new science.
Artemis is different from anything humanity has ever embarked on before. And we will discover life-saving, earth-changing science and technology along the way.
We're delving deep into what science can be achieved by humans working together with robotic capabilities and future infrastructure to support a long-term human presence at the moon.
The main purpose of the International Space Station is to perform science.
The fact that we'll have 2 companies able to provide the opportunity to reach low Earth orbit, but it'll change the way we look at how we fly to space.
The more we learn about the Earth and the more we understand the processes that affect it, the better we can plan for the future.
The needle-nose jet, the X-59, it will revolutionize the aviation industry. We will show what is possible when we dare to reach distant cosmic shores.
And we are in total solar eclipse, and this is absolutely breathtaking.
Onward and upward.
I do want to say good afternoon, and I bring you greetings on behalf of our administrator, Senator Bill Nelson, and our deputy administrator, actually retired Colonel Pam Melroy. I'm really excited to be here today. I always like to start with a video because it kind of gets me charged up and excited about the mission that NASA has to offer. I did spend the preponderance of my career with Department of Defense, with Missile Defense Agency, with Defense Contract Management Agency, Defense Logistics Agency, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, did a stint at Homeland Security, as well as with Coast Guard under DHS and DHS headquarters, and then now at NASA. So I have a very rich history of understanding federal procurement from the operator's perspective. And so that's what I want to give you from the procurement operator's perspective, how you can do business with NASA. I will say that my colleague, Darlene's peer, is Dwight Daniil. Many of you may know him. He's new to NASA. He came to us from Defense Logistics Agency, and so I will encourage you to partner with him as I've been partnering with him. So the NASA mission. NASA was stood up in 1958, so we're just over like 65 years old. Our enacted budget now is about $27 billion. The majority of our spend, about 85 to 90% of that spend, is in procurement. We also have about another $1 billion or so, a little over, that we do in grants and cooperative agreements, and I'm responsible for that as well. Our majority spend is also in services. So where you saw the hardware and everything up there, we still do run an agency, and we still do have a huge service services spend, we have what we call 23 product service lines. We talked about new entrants with Darlene. Last year, NASA had 429 new small business entrants in FY23. And so far, we have 110 new small business entrants. We are pursuing small business to do business at NASA. We're working on right now the NASA 2040 vision and intent. And then you can see our mission there, which is to explore the unknown in air and space, innovate for the benefit of humanity, and inspire the world. Inspiration is a big theme that we have in NASA. We have core values of safety, integrity, teamwork, excellence, but most importantly, inclusion. There are very few agencies that have an actual core value as inclusion. And inclusion doesn't just mean by race, creed, male, female, it means types of business. To include HBCUs, that was mentioned earlier, and I am a graduate of an HBCU, so I want to put this plug out there, but NASA is the only agency that has an actual goal for contracting with HBCUs, and so we're pursuing that as well. But bottom line for NASA is NASA wants everybody to succeed. What I intended to do today was just kind of orient you to doing business with NASA, how we're organized, what our spend is, where opportunities might be, and how to navigate the process. But in order to be able to do business with NASA, you have to know how we're organized. And so we're organized, we have 5 different mission directorates and 1 mission support directorate. The 5 mission directorates that we have, we always like to say the first A in NASA is aeronautics. So that's the first mission. And so we do aeronautics, not commercial aeronautics per se, but we do the hard aeronautics problems. So we work through things like sustainable aircraft, where we're supposed to have 100% sustainable fuel in 2050. We're working that actively. We're working what we call quiet supersonic aircraft and what we call X-planes or experimental aircraft. And we're also working on single aisle aircraft. And so those of you that might have flown here today, wouldn't it be nice if you only had 1 aisle and you had a single seat? And how do you make that more economical and affordable for people to travel across the United States? Those are just a few of the studies and the experimental aircraft we're working in Aero. Exploration systems and mission, that's where you have the deep space, the Artemis program, what we call the Artemis generation. That's our Moon to Mars program that you're most familiar with. Obviously, that's the highest % of spend is there. There are a lot of not just subcontracting opportunities, but we even have a number of primes in the small business world. For instance, just a year and a half ago, we awarded 2 spacesuit contracts. We went with 1 company that's been doing business since NASA was stood up. It was the genesis of Rockwell Collins, now RTX. And then Axiom, which is a small business, holds the other contract to develop spacesuits, both low Earth orbit as well as deep space spacesuits. So that's just one example. Another example of areas in space that we're having and seeing small business is landers on the moon. I think you saw Intuitive Machines. 1 tipped over, but it still worked, and then 1 didn't quite make it. We're expecting a couple others. Firefly will fly soon, and these are all small businesses. And so we're learning how to work with small business for them to help them get the capital that they need to hold our contracts, to be able to be as innovative as possible, and we know innovation starts with small business. We also have our space operations organization. That mission directorate does work with the ISS, which is the International Space Station. Where the International Space Station was constructed with large business, we do a lot of what we call science experiments on the ISS. And those contracts are held by many small businesses doing things like plant studies, or it could be human factor studies and the like. So there's a lot of work that goes on there. We're in the middle of a U.S., what we call U.S. deorbiting vehicle. 2030, we have to deorbit the ISS. So we're in the process of source selection for that. But as we look forward to the next generation of International Space Station, we believe it'll be an international joint venture, and we look for opportunities there for small business to hold what we call critical components and parts of that particular procurement, and that will be billions of dollars. Other things SOMD does are space communications and deep space, as well as commercial launch services. SMD is our science area, where you've seen the James Webb Space Telescope, all the fabulous pictures that look back in time, as well as our satellites and autonomous spacecraft are all done there in the space operations. For those of you that saw Perseverance that landed on Mars, that was done with our Jet Propulsion Lab with a number of small businesses that helped work that, not just the actual construct of that spacecraft and the lander and the helicopter, but those when the data comes back, that has to be crunched and analyzed. A lot of times our data analysis is done in the small business space there and through teaming with large businesses. With respect to space technology, this is a big area of entry that small businesses will often find work for you and easier for you to join with the SBIR program. I'm sure you've heard of the Small Business Innovative Research Program, as well as the STTR program, which is the technology transfer, partnering with small business and with educational institutions. We also do what we call feasibility studies and prototyping in that particular area. And then you have MSD, that's mission support. Mission support is where all of those services, everything from procurement services, HR services, grounds and maintenance, administrative, logistics services, facility services. And so small business often find that this is an area where they can come in as a new entrant to NASA. One of the things I want to say is that we did complete the full cycle of award for what we call our product service line. So we're getting ready to start the next generation of award for all of our agency service contracts. Our service contracts have been considered what you call a tier 1 for category management spend. And we do, of those contracts that we have, about 85% are set aside for small business or a socioeconomic group within the small business set aside community. This is where we do business. So as a senior procurement executive, I lead an organization of about 850 contracting people, to include contractors, as well as about another 4,000 people that do what we call contracting officer representatives or technical experts supporting and managing contracts. So each one of the sites that you see there, I think there's blue dots, dark blue dots are with the procurement offices. The light blue dot is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's our FFRDC, so work goes on there as well. And then where you see the red dots are support or test facilities. With respect to procurement, we do call procurement the cornerstone of NASA's current and future missions, because without procurement, there would be no mission. We like to manage how we do our spend and procurement using the 4 Ps. So that's people, processes, policy, and procurement as a discipline. Our spend is up right now with respect to what we're doing in procurement and the agency, because our budget is up. So what we did 3 to 4 years ago, we did transfer from individual procurement offices located around the United States to a single procurement enterprise. And that's kind of what makes all of those procurement officers, or HCAs, many of you may be familiar with that term, they report into me, so that we could have an enterprise IT office, what we call the ITPO, that's listed on the chart. Our SOUP program, we're getting ready to release SOUP 6. Right now, we're doing the analysis and working with OMB to hopefully get a best-in-class designation for category management. We're hoping to release that solicitation within the next 45 days, as well as looking at grants and cooperative agreements, enterprise services and analysis, our centralized pricing, and centralized eBiz. So all of that is on that left-hand side of the chart there. We have our research centers that we talked about, each one of the missions. If you look at aeronautics, space technology, testing, and engineering, those are done by the research centers in those locations. We have space flight centers, most notably Goddard just down the road. That's our large space flight center, primarily for science. So they do a lot of work with spacecraft, telescopes, and that kind of thing. And then we have Marshall Space Flight Center, where we have what we call our space launch system, the heavy lift system that Boeing manages for us, as well as our human landing system, which we have 2 offerers, Blue Origin and SpaceX. So those are all what we consider developmental programs. So once again, inside of those programs are opportunities for subcontracting. And then our space centers, where we have Kennedy, that's our launch complex. Everybody knows it's like America's gateway to the universe is what they like to call themselves. And then Johnson Space Center, which is the home of our astronauts, and Houston Mission Control, as well as ISS, Mission Operations and Mission Control, and Stennis, which is largely a testing facility down in Mississippi, where we do rocket propulsion testing. So a little bit about NASA by the numbers, and I'm not going to go over all the details, but I mentioned before we were in an upward trend with respect to spend. But if you look at the number of actions, we're in a slightly downward trend. What we found was we were duplicating a lot of effort when we were buying services across the enterprise. And so by using our category management and seeing the increase in dollars, we actually have a larger increase in dollars to small business by being able to what we call spend on an enterprise basis, which could be regional, it could be just at the center as far as consolidation, or it could be across NASA. We got a kind of a slow start because of the CRA, but now that we do have an enacted budget, this year we're expecting obligations of about $23 billion in procurement, and then about another $1.5 billion in grants. And the number of actions as far as grants, we have about 10,000 actions in addition to the number of procurement actions there that we have in cooperative agreements or grants. And most of our our areas and assistance are cooperative agreements because we are substantially involved as opposed to just issuing grants. So here I mentioned the 4 Ps before. You can actually see the definition of the 4 Ps. That is the structure and the framework by which we govern all of our innovations. We do have a NASA Acquisition Innovation Launchpad. It is modeled after the pill that Soraya Korea started at DHS. I used to be over the pill years ago when it first started and brought that idea to NASA. But our mission really is to actually explore and execute innovative and effective business instruments. And we're trying to optimize the capabilities of the procurement enterprise as well as industry to enable NASA's mission. And we're always striving for acquisition excellence as we're in an evolving environment. Next, I just want to kind of transition to some of the initiatives that I have going on. Every year, I develop with the Chief Acquisition Officer, Pam Melroy, I mentioned before, procurement initiatives and things that we need to focus in on so that we can be the very best we can be, the best trained, the best capable, and the best for delivery of mission in the procurement space. So for 2024, I have 4 areas. The first area is maintaining a robust procurement enterprise. I've been in place for about 3.5 years. I came in the height of COVID. Not only in the height of COVID, but also as we were trying to formulate this enterprise procurement organization. So that was a challenge, actually transforming a procurement enterprise in the COVID environment when you couldn't meet people, you couldn't talk to people. But we have established what we consider a robust enterprise. We've created recently, within the last 12 months, an e-business dashboard and an e-business office where we can look at data across all of our centers within a given company, within a segment of a company. We can look at real-time small business statistics. And new entrants are important, but we also want to retain the current entrants. So we spend a lot of time doing analytics to make sure that our supplier base remains healthy. It's not just attracting new people, but it's to make sure that companies that do business with us remain healthy. And this transition from center business process leads to enterprise business process leads. So we have people that are specializing in engineering across the enterprise, not just one discipline of engineering at a given location. We also recently awarded a new contract for a contract management system to a service-disabled small business, and very proud of that award. We teamed with HHS and Department of Air Force, and so we're all utilizing the same contractor to put together what we call a really solid contract management system. The other thing we want to do is this idea that we need to make sure that we're placing good, solid business instruments, going back to basics. And the OMB, if I don't know if you guys read all of the regulations and things that come out, but just put out this better contracting initiative. It does talk about multiple award contracting. It does talk about that rule of 2. It does talk about how do you get fair and reasonable pricing. It talks about how do you do peer reviews. Are we doing peer reviews? How are we looking at opportunities in the enterprise software area to be able to go to resellers or distributors versus to the large businesses that sell that. So we're working on all of those things and actually had been prior to that memo, but that memo we do use as a good tool to reinforce what we're already doing at NASA. We've also established a cost and pricing academy because we know the key to get good business deals is to negotiate good, solid pricing and make sure we understand the marketplace. That also goes hand in hand with market research. We've reestablished some commitments that we had with the Department of Defense, DCAA and DCMA, because largely our supplier base is the same as theirs, and we do need to work hand in hand and not duplicate each other's capabilities. The last thing that we're doing is we've kind of reinvigorated something that we call the procurement management review process, which is where we go in. We have 10 different locations, so about 3 different contracting locations per year, and look at their quality of contracting. And then at the end of the 2 to 3 week, what we call assessment analysis of their contracting to include all of the 4 Ps as well as industry feedback when we do this. And then we assign a grade of could be poor all the way to very good. So that's also being done so people can get feedback. The intent there is not to remove people from jobs, but to make sure that we have a standard level of competence with how we're doing procurement at NASA. So the next initiative is to look at the research and development space and manage that as an enterprise. You saw that we have 4 research and development centers. We've codified and consolidated those. There's work going on at each center, but I have one single SES and an SES deputy to manage it, similar to what you would see in an AFRL or an NRL environment where people have a competency in how to do R&D contracting, grants or cooperative agreements. And we are developing a community of practice, some guidebooks books and looking at how do we incentivize the best use of our financial assistance policy and operations. Intentional outreach, I think this is something that you would see across all the federal government at this point. It was very difficult to do when I first got here in that COVID environment, but yet what we saw was by doing hybrid outreach, we expanded our reach to some of the companies that could not afford to travel. So in a lot of the ways that we did the hybrid, we're now doing hybrid even going forward. But nothing beats the experience of an in-person experience. So we go around the country to try to I work with the OSBP director. I know many of you might have known Glenn Delgado was the former OSBP director, and now it is Dwight Daniil, to make sure that we have outreach in geographical locations so everybody doesn't have to fly to DC to be able to understand what NASA's doing. But we're doing continuous process improvement based upon industry feedback. And some of that feedback has led us to a number of innovations, some of which we plan to try out here soon, allowing companies to leverage AI to write proposals, more streamlined proposals of like, say, 20, 30 pages, and then going back to the future, but looking at companies coming in and doing oral proposals or oral presentations. That cuts down on BMP costs, and it also gives us a feel of who will be doing our work. We are looking at consistent implementation and standardization, but not to the detriment or benefit of the program across NASA. So if you do business with Goddard and you do business with Ames, you'll still essentially get the same RFP, understand our terms and conditions and our evaluation criteria structure. And we want industry to have a consistent business experience whenever they do business with NASA. So this next one is a chart that I borrowed from the small business community because I wanted to make sure you guys love stats, right? So we wanted to give you some stats. So we are doing very well in NASA overall with respect to our small business spend and have consistently achieved higher than our small business goal numbers. However, we are struggling with the subcategories. Those subcategories being woman-owned small business, SDVOSB, Hub Zone, and even HBCU, we're not meeting the goals that we need to meet. So one of the things I'm going to piggyback on what Darlene said was, look at the areas that we're not doing well. If you fit one of those areas, and then I'll show you shortly our acquisition forecast, you fit one of those areas and you do your market research on NASA, you see a procurement coming up and you know you can fit the bill, we want you to reach out to us. I'll give you contact information to talk to us about your capabilities, and we want to make sure we introduce you to the right people, and that would be the program people, because they're the ones that have to be convinced that you're capable of doing this work. And so there's opportunity. I could say that this is really hard, but nobody cares about this is really hard. We really do need to diversify our supplier base in NASA. We have some hard missions. It could just be services, or it could be actually our space flight hardware. It could be just the ancillary facilities management and logistics services that we need to provide, and we are counting on the small business community to offer the innovations to allow us to be successful. And this is our scorecard. So NASA has had 7 A's in a row. We're very proud of the A's. I mentioned before we don't have the plus. The plus would mean that we could exceed in those subcategories. So we're putting a lot of effort and work and outreach, intentional outreach, to different members of chambers of commerce and different members of the small business community to be able to get to the plus for next year. But as we're trying to get to the plus, the goal keeps going up. So they're kind of moving the goalpost on us, but we believe if we work together, we can achieve it. We will know on Monday what our grade is for 23. We are a year behind, but we are fully expecting to get our 8th A in a row. With respect to digital resources, this is how you get to us. We do have an external website that OP runs, Office of Procurement. We have a website the Office of Small Business Programs does run, but we also have an app. The app is the easiest and best way to get information. If you download that from either the iTunes store or from the Android store, you can get all your information about NASA at a touch. So all of the information that's on the websites will be there and located. And then we also have a vendor database that's also you can get through that app so that you can talk about teaming, not just teaming with large business, but also small business to small business as well. And bottom line I want to leave you with is that procurement wants to hear from you. This is the QR code to our acquisition forecast. For the second year, the PSC, the Professional Services Council, has given NASA the highest grade with respect to searchability, access of information, accuracy of information for our forecast to industry that you'll see there. And good is the highest rating. This is our address on our website and email. When you get on the NASA webpage, there's also a little button you can click that says, do you want to meet with the Senior Senior Procurement Executive, which is me. And I do take individual meetings, and I also have meetings you can meet with my staff, as well as joint meetings with myself and Dwight Daniel from Small Business.
Ready to start your business? Turn to us for resources, products, and exclusive offers as you plan and start your business. With Bank of America.